and there's a lot of different philosophies on it, but how I would run the race was that you start out strong and you don't necessarily coast, you're still going fast. But knowing, okay, I still have 300 meters left of the race. I still have 200 meters left of the race. And whenever I get to the last 100 meters of the race, I give it everything and then some. So knowing when to give the energy to whatever you're doing, knowing to have some reserve tank and knowing when to really push yourself and really know how to, like, what your speed needs to be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. It's a life podcast. It's a life story podcast. It's a bit of an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and I uncover the real story behind my guest's journey, finding out what makes them who they are and all that they do, talking about all the ups, all the downs, and all the thoughts and feelings in between, uncovering the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I'm a creative of many kinds, a self-employed maker of many things. And as you probably guessed, one of those things, of course, I do is podcasting, as I bring you a couple different shows at this point. But this one right here, I bring you every other Monday, as well as sporadically on Fridays for the 15-minute Friday episodes. I'm also going to take a moment here to remind you that if you do want to check something else out outside of this show, I've got some options for you there. So first, I also do an improv comedy podcast along with this one. It's called Whose Life Is It Anyway? It's kind of like this show, but imagine if the guest's life story was completely made up and there's a bunch of improv games and a bunch of messy chaos surrounding the story that guides it along. And also, I would love for you to check out my newest show. It's called Honestly Same, where myself and two of my very best friends and co-hosts, Leah and Brittany, we sit down to talk all things life, discussing the good, the bad, the ugly, and our experiences around all of it individually. So yeah, I rarely talk about those other shows on here. I'm trying to do that a little bit more because, of course, I want you to go check those out. I want you to like those shows as well. Options, folks. I have options for your entertainment, and it's probably not slowing down anytime soon. But speaking of not slowing down, the train keeps rolling. I have another conversation for you, of course. In this week, in this episode, I sit down and I have a virtual conversation once again, but this time it's with my friend Casey Steinmiller. Now, Casey is a touring music photographer and content creator, and that is actually how we met years ago. It was back in my days of being a live music photographer as well. He and I met on a tour, formed a friendship that ever since has, well, truthfully, just been kept alive via the internet, to be honest. You'll hear us talk about all of that in this conversation, of course. But it's funny that he and I's friendship has indeed, honestly, just remained solid, but has only lived online. It's only been virtual through just, texting or Instagram or some Zoom hangouts here and there. And so also some good old Call of Duty at times as well. But either way, Casey is a very chill dude, a very driven dude as well. And of course, we get to the bottom of all that here in this episode as he shares his story of all that he's done up to this point. But before we get to that, before we get to all the other concert and live music talk, let's talk about some other live concerts that you should know about, especially if you live here in Ohio, because our friends over at Promo West Productions are constantly bringing rad shows through this place. And I'm going to tell you about some of those right this very moment because, well, we are supported by our friends over at Promo West Productions, and this, of course, is how I support them back. So if you're interested in catching a live show, maybe you want to check out one of these upcoming concerts brought to you by Promo West. They've got Manchester Orchestra and Jimmy Eat World at Kemba Live Outdoors on Saturday, August 19th. They've got Granger Smith at Kemba Live Outdoors the very next day on August 20th. Then Ways Blood at Newport Music Hall on August 30th, and Local Natives also over at Newport Music Hall on September 11th. So if you want to grab tickets to any of those shows, you can do so by going to axs.com, or of course, for more information on those or any other upcoming concerts, if you want to find out who's coming to town and when, you can find all that information you need over at promowestlive.com. Now, My next sponsor for this episode is very, very fitting for this conversation. Oddly enough, it was very fitting for the last episode as well, because we are also supported by our friends over at Midwest Photo. And given the fact that Casey and I are about to dig into his entire life story, being centered all around photography and content creation in general, this one just makes too much sense. So I'm happy to tell you about my friends over at Midwest Photo. So Midwest Photo is a video, audio, and yes, of course, a photo store located right here in Columbus, Ohio. So what all does Midwest Photo do exactly? Do they sell gear? Do they rent gear? Or do they, I don't know, provide events and classes to teach and grow the local photo community here in Columbus? Well, if that sounded like I was very purposely and intentionally telling you that, that's because, yes, it's a yes to all of the above things that I just listed. They've got it all. You can buy tons of things there: tripods, cameras, stands and lighting support, backdrops even. Fun fact, the yellow backdrop that I use for nearly every guest portrait on this show, yeah, I bought it at Midwest Photo. But of course, if you're not looking to purchase, the good news is they rent gear as well. It's in a list of many services that their very rad and knowledgeable staff are ready to help you with the moment you walk in. For real, whenever I've went in there for something, there's always someone ready to answer some questions and to talk about video or photo or just, I don't know, being a creative in general. And also, along with rentals, they do offer full in-house printing services, film development and scanning, used gear, buy and sell, and even classes, like I mentioned earlier, that you can take to further your knowledge about the art and craft of photography. Because the cool thing is, when you're shopping with them, you're not just supporting local and shopping small, but you're just supporting, you're supporting a group of people and a brand who love photography and who do a lot of work to support the local photo community here in Columbus. So go check them out. If you do, tell them that Ross over at What You Don't Hear sent you their way. So if you want to find out more information on everything that they're about, you can follow them online, of course, at impex_photo_video, or simply jump to impex.com. That's MPEX.com. And I thank them so very much for being a sponsor and a supporter of this podcast. So let's get to this week's story. I laid it out earlier. This is a fun conversation with my friend Casey Steinmiller that we did virtually via Riverside FM, that I might add. Shouts to Riverside. They're a rad virtual podcasting platform that I've started using to open myself up to more conversations like this one with people who just don't live where I do. Of course, and we did that. We made that happen for this conversation. It's a rad platform. Check it out if you feel you need it. But let's just get to it. Let's get to know Casey right here in episode 89 of What You Don't Hear.
Exactly.
Otherwise, are you ready to make this official? And
man.
Get to catch up, but also get to dive into your story a way that we haven't before, even though we sort of already know each other. So this is like,
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, yeah, let's do it.
We'll make it official. Casey, my friend, welcome to the show.
Dude, so good to be here. Excited to be here.
Yes, I am very, very stoked. We were trying to hold in the conversation before we made it official on the show here, is that there have been a handful of times where, actually, when was the last time we actually got to hang out in real life? Like, when we met?
When we met, we've like played some video games and like chatted on the phone and stuff. But other than that, it's all been digital until I think it was just when we met back in 2017. I want to say,
which is insane to me.
A long time ago.
It's wild that your and I's friendship has literally just been maintained through social media and also
internet friends.
Yeah, we're internet friends, but like it's transferred well into real life. Of like, we've had some like fun phone chats and texts and all that sort of stuff, and we even indulged, how dare we, in some video games. I cannot believe it. Actually, you and I have been to war together. That's what that is. That's a cooler way to say it. That's the way cooler way to say it.
Yeah,
you and I have been into battle with one another. But like I was thinking of that earlier today when I was like, all right, cool, I'm recording with Casey tonight, and I literally was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, we're friends, that's cool, I'm having him on the show. And then I'm like, well, wow, like We actually have not hung out in real life since we met years ago.
It's like 6 years.
Literally. And so it's wild that like this is going to be some sort of like kind of a catch up and like a conversation we would normally have about all the things. Cause that's, I mean, when you and I chat, we chat about all the things.
Oh yeah.
But it's also going to be an interesting, like almost first time getting a deep dive into actually getting to know you, which is so funny because we've been friends for so long.
It's crazy.
So with that, like, I honestly kind of want to start and like, well, I'm sure we're going to jump all over the place, but I feel like you have been doing so much lately. Not that you always like haven't or whatever, but I feel like, I mean, like we were talking about, there's been a handful of times where like you've been in Ohio, but not in Columbus, and we can't like link up to hang out or whatever. So like, what all have you been up to lately?
Well, the last year,
floodgates open.
I mean, the last year is like really ramped up in my career, so it's been kind of crazy. Because like basically since like last like summer, fall, it's just been nonstop touring with a brief vacation in between, and then just tour. Yeah.
You have just been like nonstop on the road for like a minute now. Yeah.
That's been the ultimate goal though. So it's been really like sick to like actually be like, oh my gosh, I'm busy. I don't have to like worry about where work's coming from or like money or anything like that. It's like, cool. I'm like a normal adult with a normal job and like still a fun job, but like not, having to stress going, I have nothing booked for the rest of the year, Yeah,
100%. And now a couple of these questions we might have talked about before, but obviously for the show's sake, I might re-ask some things that we've talked about, but like, remind me, like, are you like, you're now like completely freelance and everything?
Oh yeah. I've been freelance since I graduated college in 2016.
Oh, dope. Okay. So when you and I met, then you were.
I was couch surfing and pretty broke and making almost no money, but yes.
Okay. So honestly, I would love to just dive into that because this is something that you and I really haven't dove into before.
No, of course.
And what better place than a show that I conveniently have you on to talk about it? Where does all of that, like, where does the interest in even, because you said, hey, touring full time, that was the goal. Yeah. Where does that interest even come from that even leads you to being a broke, straight out of college kid, couch surfing, touring, all that sort of stuff? Take me back. Like where does that begin?
So lucky for you, this is a long story.
Love it. We got the space and we got the time.
Yeah, we got the time. Because like people ask me, I'm like, this is not like a 2-minute conversation. This is like this goes back. So I went to college for art originally. And I was an art major, but that just wasn't like, in my head, I was like, I don't know if this is going to like pay bills. And like, I don't know what my end goal with this is. And like, it was like kind of graphic designy, but like, I didn't know what to do. But, my parents both worked at the college. So they were like, go to college. I got free tuition for going. So it was like, just kind of an easy, like, yeah, this is a good game plan. I'll just figure it out as I go along. And I was also on the track team. So I had track scholarships. So it was like, just full send to college. You'll figure it out as you go. And so as an art major, a lot of classes were fun, great teachers, everything like that. But I switched majors because they had a new program for digital media. And that was everything from like graphics to web to photo, video, like just all encompassing, like Swiss Army knife, sort of like, here's what you need in today's day and age, which again, this was back in 2013, 14, something like that. So even then, back then, it was still like a new concept to have like all of these like things put into one person. So I switched majors, like I think late my freshman year, and my dad told me I should try out for this club on campus. It was I don't remember what it was called before then, but we did a rebranding in the middle of it, but it was called the Guerrilla Activities Board. And basically it was an on-campus like entertainment booking group. So they would bring musicians, comedians, like entertainers of all sorts to college campus for the students. But it was all like student driven and student run. And so I was like, sure, why not? I'll just join the club. And I kind of found it fun. I was like, this is a weird kind of world to live in. So fast forward to my junior year, they were like, hey, you've been part of this club for a while. Do you want to go to Minneapolis for the national convention? You just get to go, fully expense paid for. You get to go watch all these artists, and, like take notes and like see, who we should bring back to campus and like just scout and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, a paid vacation to Minneapolis. That sounds great. Why not? I like traveling. Right. And my dad was in that kind of circuit back in his day in college. And so he had a lot of contacts from when he was in college. He was like, hey, go say hi to, this person, this person, this person. They all work at the national level. I used to be friends with them in college. It'd be good, for you to say hi to them. I was like, all right, sure, why not? And so there, I'm watching all these bands and like going to all these booths and like meeting all these, entertainers and stuff like that. I finally started saying hello to some of my dad's old contacts. And, I got some great old stories about him and everything like that. But one of the guys, he was like, hey, your dad says you take photos. Do you want to take photos of the, artist tonight? I was like, I don't have a cameraman. He goes, no, you can use mine. I've never seen your work, but here's a camera. And it was like a nice top of the line. I was like, oh my God. Like compared to the, small camera I had back at home, that was like a, tiny DSLR entry starter. This was like professional level, 7200 full, the works.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I was just like, you're letting me I've never shot a show before in my entire life. And you're just going to all right. Yeah. You know what? Fine. Why not? And I'm trying to remember the name. I think the two headliners were this band called Five Knives that was signed to Red Bull Records, and then a band called the Downtown Fiction, which I had kind of heard of from like Warped Tour sort of stuff. So I was like, oh, I kind of know this band. Like I know one of their songs. This is super sick. And so I'm taking photos during the show and I'm just falling head over heels for it. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, I love this. This is, and I went back to my hotel room that night and I just started editing away. I was like, this is awesome. Photos were awful, but it was so fun. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So like looking back, I'm like, oh, really? That's what, all right. It was, so, I got back from that trip and immediately went to like full like research mode, just looking up who does this, how to do this, like what's a career path, how do I make this like my thing. And there was like no guides or anything like that. There was a couple, big photographers touring in like the Warped Tour scene, but it was just like, 3 people and they were doing everyone. And like, just, there was no like, here's how you get into this, here's how you start. And so it was really rough. Yeah. So that's like kind of how I got the entry into it. And so once I got out of, that, I kind of started shooting locally at like a really small bar.
Okay, so before we continue down the timeline that way, I actually want to reverse even more.
Okay.
So take me back to like, what is growing up like?
Okay.
And where is this interest in even photography or anything like that in general even pop up from? Of, hey, this is what I want to go to school for. And then obviously photography pops up, but like, where, like, what is growing up kind of like, are you surrounded by creativity? Are you how are you introduced in that way? Or was it something that like wasn't around and you wanted? Like, walk me through that.
So I was born in New York, but my parents, we all moved to Southeast Kansas, to a small college town, 20,000 people, Pittsburgh, Kansas, to my dad had a job offer there. So we all moved. And so I was like 3 years old. So I really don't remember anything before then. But I grew up in a small town in Southeast Kansas. So went to Catholic school, K through 12. It was a very weird, sort of different environment, very like strict rules and guidelines and things like that. But my dad, he went to college in school for graphic design and that stuff. And my grandfather, he was an art director. So it was a weirdly like, my family had like a lineage almost of like artsy people. And so,
Interesting. Okay.
It was never something I really thought about, but it was always kind of around, like even around my house. My dad had old screen prints from when like some of his artwork and stuff just hang up on the walls that I passed by it every day, but I never really thought it. So it was always like there. I just never was like art, Yeah. And so art classes were fun in high school and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I have a small interest in this. And then we also had a tech class that was also kind of fun. That I was like, oh, this is, Photoshop is cool or whatever. And, I was kind of tech savvy and I liked video games. So it kind of felt right and made sense sort of deal. So I guess that's kind of like where the start to it all was. And, like I said, once I got to college, it was like, you have to declare a major. I'm like, I guess art. I don't know. I kind of know how to draw, but I'm not great at it. So
Right. Okay. So there wasn't like that early burning desire where you were like, this is what I have to do. It was just like, hey, this is here. And it's college time.
The pieces kind of fell into place. And like I said, it was like a plan to just go to college and like kind of not necessarily figure it out, but kind of try things out and really like dive into some different areas of my life that I'd never really tried before. So
Right. So was there any part of you, I mean, because I'm like super unfamiliar, and I
yeah,
don't even ask this question to like,
sure.
oh, let's dig into like some negative secrets or whatever. But
Yeah.
like what's Catholic school like? Like, what is like, do you feel like, did that mold or shape you into like any sort of like, and when I ask this, I don't mean view on like religion. I mean,
no,
view
of course.
on just like life or adventuring out into these sort of things. Cause I feel like there's a little bit of a, you know, a difference of like going to Catholic school and what that could bring you. And then also becoming a DIY touring photographer. Like those are kind of disconnected, right?
It's super bizarre. I guess the big thing was like, it was very competitive. Like everyone was always talking about grades and everyone was doing sports. And so if you weren't super busy and had a lot going on, like, I don't want to say you weren't popular, because I definitely wasn't popular, but like it was a weird, you're always like prepping for your future almost, if that makes sense. You're like, how can I boast my resume to get into a good college? Like it was one of those schools where a lot of people were like trying to get to Ivy League and like, you know, really like 4.0s, you know, like I was the middle of my class with a 3.5 GPA, and, you know, which says a lot, because I got to college and I think I had like a 3.9 something. It was like, or 3.89 or something high comparatively. And so college was a breeze compared to high school. It was so weird. Yeah. Like high school was so much more rigorous and like all of the academics and everything. And, you know, I got to college and I was like, oh, I don't have to study for anything. This is sick. Like,
yeah. Can I ask a random question?
Go for it.
Like, do you feel like the competitive, like you said, nature of what school sort of was like throughout high school and you know, all that sort of stuff, of like, you kind of always felt like you were looking towards the future of like, I need to do this so I can get into a good college, so I can blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like any of that ever took you out of the moment of like growing up, or like the moment of like being a kid, or the moment of like enjoying anything? Or do you feel like it was like, hey, you know what? It was competitive, but it was such smooth sailing. Like it was fine.
I mean, I had lots of outlets for being competitive other than school too.
Okay.
Like I did track, I did soccer, I did karate all through high school. I did Boy Scouts. I mean, I was busy all the time. And so it was just one of those things, like, I was like, how much stuff do I enjoy? How much stuff can I keep doing? And so I was just like packing my schedule, and I enjoyed a lot of it too. So it was never like, you know, I missed out on anything, because I was always doing something.
Okay, yeah. So it wasn't more so like it was the schooling that you were like chained to. It was like that was sort of like the vibe of the school. But because of that, it also fed me into, I got to be busy with, like you said, a bunch of other things that I enjoyed.
Yeah, so, like extracurriculars were like a huge thing for everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so walk me through then, like when we are, you know, we're graduating and we're getting ready for college. And you said that kind of like the decision was sort of like a, not that you didn't care, but it was sort of like this thing I think would be the most. Like, what was that process like?
So like I said, my college, or my parents both worked at the college, and so it was an easy, like, it was always an option, I guess. And, you know, I did the ACTs and all that stuff, and I tested okay, but I didn't really have like I want to go do this, so I'm going to go to this school. And I'd done really well in track that year too. And so the college, or the coach of the college, you know, had kind of noticed and was like, hey, you know, we'll put you on the team if you want to go to school here. And I was like, kind of like, just gives me another reason to go to, you know, Pitt State. And, you know, it's a great school. There's nothing wrong with going there, but I definitely didn't want to get sucked into like the living in my hometown, going to college in my hometown, graduating, staying in my hometown. Like, I didn't want to get stuck in Pittsburgh the rest of my life. And I definitely had goals for like traveling and, you know, not living here. And so it was, I saw so many people I knew kind of get sucked into the hometown sort of thing. And well, there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't for me.
For sure.
So I was very hesitant for going to Pitt State, but at the same time, it was like one of the best experiences, and I'm super happy I did it. So.
And so do you feel like once you made that decision of like, all right, here's what I'm going to go to school for, how long do you feel like before it settled in that you were like, oh, wait, cool, good choice? Like, was there ever a moment where you were like, all right, what am I doing? We got to figure out if I really like this. Or were you like, yo, as soon as I got a camera in my hands, I was like set, or, you know, whatever. Like,
it was, I mean, I didn't really have a plan because college is 4 years long. So it was like, I have 4 years to figure out what I'm going to do before I graduate.
Yeah.
And so I think that was always my mentality of like, I'll figure it out later, but also like, we'll see. And I'm kind of glad I did, because it just was like a weird freak accident that I ended up getting into that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like throughout this entire thing so far, it sounds like you've given yourself time or like the space to like, where like, I feel like during this time frame, most often, that's when we're being pushed into these things and you feel like you have no time. But it does sound like you almost kind of did the opposite a little bit, where you were like, hey, yeah, I got to make these decisions and I do kind of have to go do this thing, I feel like, but I'll figure it out. I'll see what happens. Like,
and I kept myself so busy in college again that I was like, I didn't really need to think about stuff, because I was like, oh, cool, I got track practice, I have these clubs, I have a part-time job, I'm hanging out with friends, I have a social life. It was like never like thinking big picture. Was, I guess I was more living in the moment now that I think about it.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And so when does the story that you told earlier happen, where you officially get a camera in your hands? And...
Yeah, so that was my junior year, like 2015, I want to say the end of 2015. So the whole summer between junior and senior year of college was, I'm going to start shooting locally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that you get a camera in your hands, you get to like, hey, go shoot these bands. You're like super stoked. You go home, you're editing, or you go to your hotel, you're editing them that night, all this sort of stuff. Is that like first kind of official door opening to you being like, oh, this live photography thing I love? And how much had you dabbled into photography in general before that? Like, was it portraits? Was it friends? Was it other live things that you had sort of done? Like, walk me through when we're really forming that photography interest.
Yeah, so like I said, I switched majors my like end of my freshman year to digital media. So I had taken a bunch of like camera and like photo classes and stuff like that. So I'd done portraits, and I've done, like I had a rough understanding of like how to shoot manually. And so I knew how to use a camera. I knew how to get the basics down, lighting, composition, like, and again, it wasn't like amazing, but it was like, I have a rough understanding of all this. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd taken a bunch of classes, so it wasn't like I was brand new to any of that. So it was like, this is like, oh, this is the photography that really interests me. Like I like doing portraits and I like doing other stuff, but this is what like grabbed me. This is like, oh, this is the cool stuff.
Yeah. So what was it that grabbed you? Was it like the production? Was it the bands? Was it the just capturing the moment? Like,
yeah, I think it was just the environment of like being at a concert is so intoxicating. So being there to like work, and like, I guess being there to like, I don't even know. There's so many elements of it, but I think it was just like, this is a really cool way to do photography, and not a lot of people get to do this. I like it a lot, maybe.
Right. Well, because I asked that too, because like, I did live photography for a little while. That's how you and I met. We were both conveniently, crossing paths on the same tour. Right. But also for me, I could identify that like, even when I was doing it, I was like, I'm enjoying this, but this isn't my thing.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I mean? I was very much like, I love this. It's fun to capture these moments and document these things. And whether it's cool lighting or a DIY basement somewhere, capturing these things, it's fun getting the energy of the show and, all that sort of stuff. Because that's even, another reason that I asked that is because for me, I could identify, I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't know if there's like something major that's popping out for me.
Sure.
And like, and I went through and like had a phase where I did get to shoot a lot of like big shows, and I got to check off a lot of lists of like some of my favorite bands I got to go and do photography for, or take photos of and stuff. And realistically, ultimately, most of them were just for the gram at that point.
Sure.
Right? But,
yeah, I get that.
But like, even when I was doing that, I definitely accepted like, this is a hobby for me.
Sure.
And I love any gigs that I get from this, of being paid to do it or cool opportunities or whatever. But I feel like I was very clear on that decision of, even though I was like, I like this, I still was like, yeah, this isn't going to be my thing though. Like, I feel like I knew at some point I was going to be like, oh yeah, cool. All right. I did that. It's out of my system now.
Well, and that's great, because not everyone has that self-realization either. Like, they're like, oh, this is super cool, I need to keep doing this. But do you like doing this? Like, not everyone has to be a live music photographer. There's so many different ways to do photos and stuff like that. So
Right. When that's the thing is like, I feel like a lot of us tend to, once we find an identity in something or we find like that label, that name tag we can put on ourselves, we're like, oh, cool. I'm a this thing now. And it's very easy to like, not really check in with yourself of like, is this fulfilling me in the same way? Or is this letting me grow? And it is very easy just to be like, yeah, this is what I do. And then after years of doing it, all of a sudden you're like, why am I not stoked on this anymore? And it's like, well, have you given yourself the room to grow?
Sure.
And so it's cool for me to hear that you, like, even if you maybe weren't clarifying it to yourself early on.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sitting here now as a full-time touring photographer. So it's like clearly something stuck. Clearly you cared about it in a way that you knew you were like, oh yeah, this is the thing I'm going to continue to pursue.
Yeah. And I think like thinking about it a little more, I think part of it was giving a visual element to the music, because I love music and I love listening to music. I can't play at all to save my life. Like, no. I think I tried cello in like 8th or 7th grade and it was just not a good time.
Perfect.
Yeah, right. But no, I think the link between, really getting to listen to the music live and also like capture those moments and like putting like, if you see a photo of a band, you think of their music, kind of giving some sort of connection to it is, I think, what really drew me in.
Yeah. And I think, you said this was around like 2015.
2015. Yeah.
I also feel like at that point in time, that was sort of a little bit of like a rise of like touring photographers. And probably before everybody was called a content creator.
Yeah.
I feel like that was starting to become more
it was
of a
new
thing. Like, yes, it existed, but now with like, we're really in the midst of like Instagram, we're really in the midst of Twitter, and like half of it, yes, sure, it was kind of just like a cool thing that people could do, but you were entering it in a time where it's like, now, like you were saying, the visual element that goes along with these bands and this music and all this sort of stuff, they started to go more hand in hand. It wasn't just, oh, there's press and they're taking some photos of the show. It started to become, hey, the photographer, the videographer, whatever, is sort of a de facto extra member of the band on this tour or in this show or like whatever it may be. So I feel like you were entering that world as it was also becoming like a more doors open sort of thing.
Which definitely made it difficult to figure out what the hell I was doing.
Yeah. So in what way of like figuring out
like just how to make this a career and how to make money off it, and like just there was no guidelines, nothing at all. It was just wild west.
Yeah. So you said earlier, you mentioned you were like, okay, so I started shooting locally, a lot of that sort of stuff. Is that kind of what you did at first, is like dive into surrounding scene of like...
Yeah, so there was one bar in Pittsburgh, Kansas that had live music, and it was called TJ Leland. So I was like, okay, I know one place where some bands show up. And so I messaged them on Facebook. I said, hey, can I take photos at your bar? And they said, we can't pay you, but we'll give you free drinks if you copy us on like the Dropbox. I was like, that sounds sick. I'm a college student, free alcohol. I am in.
Amazing.
And yeah, so, it was like 2 can lights and like a really, awkward, like the lighting was abysmal. And it was just not good, and everything was super dark. But, I started shooting some of the bands there, and yeah, it was so weird.
Which that bad lighting certainly helps you learn quickly what helps make a photo. So like,
yeah, no, absolutely. And so it was a very trial by fire. I was like, okay, I have to really bump up some settings on this. Yeah. But because of that bar, I, worked with the band, and we kind of kept in contact. And so once I graduated, they said, hey, we're going on tour. We can't pay you, but we'll feed you. Do you want to take photos for us on tour? I was like, sure, why not? And it was the roughest, most awful tour I've ever been on my entire life.
The very first one?
The very first one. Rickety old van, no trailer, middle of the desert in the summer, no air conditioning. The van broke down a couple times, couldn't afford a hotel or anything. Like, it was... just pinching pennies, and like I was maybe making like $15 a day sort of a thing.
A classic tour.
It was awful. And like $15 a day from like other bands that we were playing with. I would literally hit up every band on the bill and be like, I'm taking photos tonight. Do you want some? So,
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Which absolutely makes sense of like, all right, how can I make the most of why, while I'm here and all that sort of stuff. So, what's interesting is like, that was another element for me when I did a handful of DIY tours. I immediately found out, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a live photographer this bad. I very much was like, this is fun. I got some fun stories now. But it actually quickly showed me that I was like, I don't know if I actually love traveling that much in this way. And I don't necessarily know if I love the act of the DIY tour and going out and taking the photos. Like, I love taking the photos, but even that, I was like, I don't know if I like doing it in this way. So it's interesting that, again, you experienced that.
Yeah.
And you're still sitting here today doing the thing. So it must have been something where you were like, this, I mean, what was going through your head at that point in time? Were you like, wait, is this what it is? Or were you also like, hell yeah, we're in the middle of it? Like,
I think I was just excited to be doing it. Cause like, it's one thing to be like, yeah, I'm going out on tour, but it's another thing to be like, I'm on tour, even though it was like, we're playing to 10 people a night if we're lucky. And like, it was really rough, but I think I was just stoked to like be making progress. Cause like before that, I was shooting for an online publication, but I was, going to shows, but I wasn't getting paid for it. I was just, getting free tickets and like getting to travel. Like, the nearest place to do big music was Kansas City from Pittsburgh, and it was 2 hours. So I was always traveling like 2 hours to there, to Tulsa, to Wichita, to Springfield. Like, there were a handful of cities around the area that were all drivable, but it was all several hours from where I was. So during college, even, I was driving to shoot a show, coming back that night, and then going to 8 a.m. class the next morning. Like,
yeah. Now, see, I feel like the value in that, and as I explain this, you're going to be like, well, duh, yeah, dude, I lived it. But like, I think you were deciding to do a lot of things that a lot of people do not do. Yeah. And that is not just take opportunities that were presented to you, but make opportunities. I think like that is a huge thing of like, you could have sat and you could have been like, oh yeah, like not a lot happens in my town. I got to drive 2 hours to go do this. Or I got to like, I have class in the morning. There's no way I can stay out and do that. But it's like, that is proof in itself of like just taking the action to decide, no, I'm going to do this thing regardless of how much it might drain me, or regardless of how much it might like, it might be difficult. Cause I always think there's a difference of like, someone could sit and say, no, I really, really want to do photography. And then when the options are, well, drive 2 hours and shoot that show with class tomorrow, and then also try to meet and greet and network and all this sort of stuff. It's very easy to be like, oh, but not like that though. I don't want to do it like that. And it's like, so, I mean, like, props to you for taking those shots at like, yeah, I'm going to commit to it. Cause it's very easy in that moment to be like, I don't know about this. Like,
well, and I kind of accidentally set myself up early to win because, like I said, high school was so hard and I was so busy all the time that I got to college and I was just taking extra hours in classes just to fill time. So I was taking 21, 24 hours in whenever you normally take like 16, just because I was like kind of bored and like could do it. And so by my senior year, I'm the bare minimum to stay as a student athlete, like 12 hours. And half those classes were like very fluffy, like assistant to the teacher sort of kind of classes. It was very weird. Like I had a lot of free time senior year, which allowed me to, oh yeah, I can drive up to Kansas City because I don't have classes on Friday or like whatever. The only thing I had to do was trying to explain to my track coach why I had to practice early that day so I could drive up to a concert and take photos. And I can't ever forget this because he literally said, that's not a thing.
I love that.
And I literally like pulled out my phone. I'm like, no, look at the photos from this last show. And he was like, all right, but you do have to practice early. And I need to know that you like actually did this and you're not just like slacking off. I'm like, I'm trying to make this a career. And to this day, we still talk about that story, but it's just so funny. Dope. Like walking into his office, like trying to like beg with him, like, please let me just go shoot this show. I'm already approved. I just need your permission now to go.
Yeah.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Guys, I got the new mix. Cool, let's hear it. Hot off the press. What kind of monster would do this?
Don't torture your friends and bandmates with bad mixes.
Get the modern pop-punk mixing and mastering template. Includes mixed tracks and buses for MIDI drums, vocals, guitars, bass, plus master bus processing. And you can even get Slate and Waves versions for multiple popular DAWs. Import your own stems or record directly into the template. The modern pop-punk mixing and mastering template includes everything you need to take your mix from start to finish immediately.
So, okay, when you mentioned earlier, like way earlier when we opened the show, is like you were talking about like, oh yeah, when we met, like or maybe it wasn't when we met, but you were like, early on, I was just broke college kid, just out DIYing on the road. Walk me through that time frame. Like, what is that whole part of the timeline like, where you are committing to the thing? You're doing what it takes. You're sitting and you're like, okay, I'm broke college student or fresh out of college. Like, walk me through that timeline.
Yeah. So I graduated. My parents immediately were like, you got to get a job. And I was like, okay, I'm going to apply to a bunch of jobs and do some interviews, but I don't want to work at any of these places at all. And so I did what I said. I interviewed at a bunch of places and I just knew it wasn't a good fit. And like, they knew it wasn't a good fit. So it was like one of those like, nah. And so I was fulfilling obligations to them to try and satisfy, because they couldn't see into the future like where I am now, Right. And I couldn't either, but I had to tell them, trust me, which was tough.
Yeah, it's different when you're the one with the belief. Like they might support you, but you're the one that's like, in my brain, I believe that I'm going to do this.
Yeah. It's
hard to convey that necessarily to somebody else. They could be supportive, but also like, yeah, but you still need to kind of do this thing while you're trying to figure that out. Like,
and they were supportive because they let me, like, I didn't have rent or anything. So I still lived at home, but I was gone most of the time. Yeah. And so I was, so I was, right out of college, I was like trying to find work or anything, but also trying to shoot shows and like trying to, do anything. So then I did that first tour. And because of that, I met somebody in Lawrence, who's one of my best friends to this day, who actually, it was the band we met with, Sweet Ascent.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so he was like working or promoting. I don't remember exactly what his job was at the show, but he was there. And he had mentioned, we need a videographer for our day on Warped Tour. Like we're playing locally. Can you do videos? Like, sure. And in my head, I was like, I barely know how to do that. I do photos, but I can wing it. And so after that, tour got done, I did Warped Tour with them for the day in Bonner Springs and did the video, but they liked the photos more than the video. So I was like, hey guys, like, what are you doing? And they're like, yeah, come out with us. Like, let's start touring. And so it was like a slight step up. It was like, okay, cool. Van with no air conditioning to van with air conditioning. You're making like $20 a day from the actual band.
That's some progress.
So yeah, I was like, all right, baby steps. And
totally.
Yeah. And so while I was doing tours with them, one of their roommates was in a band. I was touring with them. They had shot a music video for a different band. They started bringing me out. And all the while I was doing this, I was trying to network online as well, Facebook, and add people and whatever, which is so weird to just cold message people and,
Right.
Yeah. And so, but I did get added to this music like gigs group, and somebody messaged me. I was like, hey, do you want to work a VIP show? And I was like, I don't know what that means. They're like, it's super easy. You just hand out like gift bags to people and check names off the list. I was like, I can do that. And so I drove down to Tulsa, and I don't remember what show. It was like Blake Shelton or something. It was some big country artist, but started working for this VIP company. And, they were like, yeah, if you want to sign up on our portal, like we'll start getting you regular gigs if you sign up for them and stuff like that. And it was solid money. I was like, this is great. Like while I'm home and not on touring, I can just sign up for these gigs. And this kind of like feeds me a little bit of money. So I started working for them doing VIP, like as a local check-in person, literally just like, what's your name? Let me see your ID. Check. All right, here's your stuff. Enjoy the show.
Yeah. I love that there was kind of just like a consistent flow of things of like, again, spotting the opportunities or making the opportunities and then accepting them when they're presented. If not just like, oh, well, it's not this. And that sounds pretty hard. So I don't know. Like, and I'm sure there was, probably something that popped up where you're like, oh, I can't do that. But it does sound like it just sort of like was a snowball effect from or a domino effect of like gradually keeps building. Now, what I would love to know, and maybe the answer is just like, nah, man, it was pretty smooth. Was there like any point in time during that time frame where like you were sort of like, hey, this actually kind of sucks. Like I'm having fun, but were there those moments where you were like, yo, I'm like too broke right now? Or is this actually like, not that, oh, my passion for photography was going away, but more so like, ooh, am I choosing the right route right now? Like, were there any of those like tough moments during that where you were like, what the fuck am I doing?
I slept in my car several times so I didn't have to get a hotel to save money in Kansas City.
Okay.
And I couch surfed a lot, and there were nights where I was like messaging whoever I was friends with. I was like, "Hey, I don't want to be a burden. Can I crash on your couch?" They're like, "No, sorry, I'm out of town," or whatever. And I was like, "Cool, I'm gonna sleep in my car in a Walmart parking lot because I don't want to drive back home 2 hours. I also I don't want to waste the gas money for that. And I also don't want to spend money on a hotel because that would just blow away all of the money I made for the week or whatever." And I was, stringing together little tiny like photo shoots and like live shows and stuff like that from like local bands up here. So it was like not super profitable, but it was better than nothing. And so I was kind of like eating costs a little bit just to be up here.
Yeah. So was that the balance you held for a while? Was it like you were pretty much like freelancing essentially, or was there still that? I know you said you had that gig like back at home and all that sort of stuff that you could kind of do, but were you just sort of like it wasn't like, oh, I was juggling a job at the bank and then they would let me off for tours or whatever?
So all those jobs while I was in college, I worked in an IT department for a railroad company for a little while.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
super weird. I worked.
Specific.
Yeah, I know. I worked in their graphics department as well too, as part of my like internship for my college classes. But I also worked as a fitness supervisor at the like on campus gym. Just like
that's
cleaning.
fun.
Yeah, it was so easy. It was just cleaning equipment, telling people, "Hey, don't do that." That's really, you realize how dumb you're being with these like very heavy objects that can hurt you, right? Like, come on, man.
So a literal fitness supervisor.
Yeah,
like,
no, literally making sure people like, didn't hurt themselves and stuff. So, but after I graduated, all that stopped, and I was like, this is full send into the stuff. So if it wasn't like music related, I really didn't do it, other than maybe a couple weddings or something here or there.
Yeah, man, that's actually so interesting to hear, because I feel like most often people do, like, I almost feel like I have the opposite conversation with people a lot. Not in the sense of like, no, quit a real job and go get the creative job. Like, not so much that, but I feel like I so often have talked people out of like the idea that like, well, they're doing this one thing that they don't really like to kind of support the thing that they do, but they're letting the thing that they don't like take all of their energy. So then they never feel like doing the thing that they want to do. And then they're caught in this mess where they're just like, I don't know, I really want to do this, but I never have the time and energy. Yeah. And it's so interesting to hear, again, you had like a sureness from early on of like, if it takes me sleeping in my car or crashing on a couch and asking somebody and going through that, then that's just what I have to do. Yeah. That is very interesting that, like, again, once those, what I will just call kind of like quote unquote normal jobs were somewhat out of the picture, you were like, yeah, and this is now the track that I'm going down.
Yeah. I mean, I was super lucky in the fact that I had no college debt. So I had no like bills or anything to pay as far as that. And I also had a safety net for worst case scenario. My parents would still let me come home and like sleep, in my, like where I grew up and everything like that. So I was still like living there. So I had a decent safety net, and it's not like I had mountains of college debt and everything to pay off, and like this big looming, thing that was like, yeah, you really have to get a job to start paying off some of the stuff for like, living expenses or whatever, and I was still on my parents' insurance, and like, there were a lot of like little things that added up that like, cool, I have a lot of freedom to like really pursue this that unfortunately not everyone gets. Yeah.
And it's interesting because like, I feel like I had a somewhat similar route though, of like, I didn't go to college, so I didn't have, the college debt, of course. Yeah. And I mean, still to this day, if I told any of my family members I was going to move home with them, they'd be like, yes, let's go. Like, they'd probably be excited.
Sure.
So that option was always there. And I was, lucky enough to have family members who would, if I was like really down low, they'd help me out with rent and stuff like that. So I also had that safety net sort of thing. But at the same time, I also had for a while that difficult balance still of, okay, I still need to like pay all these other bills. And like you were saying, like I slept in my car to make sure I wasn't breaking even or going negative that day from the stuff that I made. So it's like still that sort of balance of, all right, cool. Like I know, like, cool, you might have avoided the day-to-day normal day job, but still having to figure out that balance of, all right, how do I make this work? And again, even for me, like I, for a little bit of time was like trying to enter the freelance world and trying to enter the creative world. but I still had that like, oh, well, I gotta, almost because I felt like I had to,
Sure.
because I didn't know how to freelance, right?
Nobody tells you how.
Yeah, no, there's no playbook. There isn't.
No.
I mean, there's a ton of internet gurus now who will charge you $200 for a PDF that says how to. But you know, at that point in time, it was very much like, oh, I think I need to have this job to support everything while I try and figure out these creative ventures.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring all of that up and asked you that question too was just like that I do think that in that time frame, whether there's a mass amount of debt or very hard things or whatever, there's still that deciding moment of, well, I've got this thing over here that's kind of in my way of the dream.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is very easy for that to kind of completely get in the way of that dream and completely block that dream. And that is the decision of, you know, there was a while, you know, I've shared this story before, but I mean, there was a little bit of time where, like, no joke, I was like digging through my couch in my apartment to see if I had dropped any like loose quarters in there so I could like go get a drink.
I remember hearing about this story. Yeah.
and it's just like, you know, I think back to that. I'm like, what are you doing? But I'm also like, in that moment,
surviving,
though, you're very much like, no, this is just kind of what I have to do. Just like you sleeping in your car. I'm sure there were some nights where you're like, what the fuck? Like, why am I sleeping in my car? Yeah. But you're also, it's still like, but I'm going to.
Yeah. No,
you know
absolutely.
I mean? Like,
yeah.
For me,
if this is what it
time,
takes.
Exactly. Like for me, trying to figure out freelance and just making no money, and like the only money I could make went straight to bills and straight to rent. And if I was really, really bad off, like sometimes, like I said, I had family members who would help me out. Otherwise, I wasn't just like relying on them. Just like you were, like you might have had that safety net, but you only want that safety net if you're truly falling.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
absolutely.
You're going to figure it out. Right. And I mean, there were a handful of times when I was trying to navigate freelance where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like I really, really want to. And I feel like I'm supposed to, you know, be this creative person who does all these things. But like I have literal negative money in my bank account at times. And I'm just like, dude, why? But so much of the theme that I've heard from your story so far is the like, there's almost that subconscious voice that is like, you might not be sitting and thinking yourself through a perfect plan of like, no, if I just do this and that and this and that, it's almost just this like reserve tank that's like, we're going to figure it out and we're going to keep going. We're going to figure it out. We're going to keep going. And we're going to do what it takes. Yeah. And it is very easy, rightfully so. Also, if big enough defeats pop up, to be like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't worth it. Right. But I think that's also like, that turns into adjusting your plan. And adjusting your course and shifting your course and understanding like, all right, this problem has arose, but what's my solution that I can look at with it? And I feel like that's so much of, at least so far, what you've kind of done to build your career is like, problems might have popped up, but you weren't so much focused on, wow, this is a difficult problem. This sucks. Why am I trying to be a touring photographer? You very much were looking at it in the sense of, this sucks and I might be bummed or sad or broke or whatever, or all of the above. But what's a solution around this? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is just thinking, where does this get me to? Like, if I do this, what is this going to lead to? And, you know, how can this benefit me other than just like money? Which is why I started doing the VIP gigs, was I was like, it makes me money, but also it gets me into a bigger world of not just like, you know, dive bars and stuff. It's like putting me in arenas. And while I'm just a local hand, you know, for this VIP company, it's still, you know, getting me some sort of access into that world that I didn't have before.
For sure. Okay. So as you're kind of going through that, we're building the snowball, right? We're collecting more tours. We're sleeping in our car. We're all this sort of stuff. Like, walk me through that next part of the timeline here. Like, how long, like how many years are you going and kind of doing like, you know, the DIY touring? Was it relatively quickly when you were like, oh, here's some dope offers now? Like, because again, we were, you know, friends, internet friends during, I think the most of that time, but I mean, looking back, I don't really remember the trajectory. I just feel like one day it was like,
something happened.
And he's
exactly.
Doing, you know, cool DIY tours and taking cool photos. And then the next day it was like, oh, and now he's like busy all the time on bigger tours and doing all this other stuff. Like, how was that, like years worth, or was it like, hey, year 2, I got this dope opportunity? Like,
So I started doing those VIP gigs in like early 2017, while doing a lot of like touring and stuff like that, small van and trailers and everything like that, just pounding the pavement. Like if I can be out on the road, I'm gonna be out on the road. I would literally hop from tour to tour to tour, but they were all like small van and trailers. And so nothing really big. But then I kind of hit a big life hurdle, which was really like not great. So the end of 2017, I had a heart attack and died for like a solid 60 seconds. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So never told you about this. And I'm pretty open about it, but I just don't like, yeah. So I had a heart attack, and the only reason I knew that I had a heart attack was because my brother had some issues. And I found out it was genetic. So they put like a little monitor thing in my chest. And so New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, like around that time, I was like, wow, I'm really tired. And I just like passed out for a little while. And I had a call from my cardiologist like 2 weeks later, like, hey, you died. And I was like, what? Okay, that's all right, cool. And so like immediately my thought was the dream is gone. Like I'm going to have medical bills to pay, I like physical limitations, like all sorts of stuff. I was like, I can't tour if I have a heart problem. You know what I mean? Like just everything kind of went up in flames, and all like the work I had done for 2 straight years was just, I was in panic mode basically. And so like I had to have some really, really interesting conversations with my cardiologist. Like, okay, is there a way for me to be able to do this job while having this? And so it was a lot of back and forth, like, well, you're really healthy. You don't need this. You need this. Like, we can get away with doing this until you have issues with it again and stuff like that. And, I had to take a solid like month and a half off of work, maybe even 2 months, just because of heart surgery, like to get a defibrillator put in. And so like that was soul crushing to begin with, just finding out like I can't work for 2 months. What am I going to do with myself?
Yeah, I mean, also to get so when you passed out for that nap or whatever, is that when you died?
Yeah, I was literally like just minding my own business in my like bedroom, and I just like felt really lightheaded and just right onto the bed, and then I woke up and I was like, that was weird, whatever, and then went running like 2 miles the next day, like totally normal again.
What?
And I was just like, that was strange. Wow, whatever. Like, yeah.
And then so because your cardiologist like gets that information, all that stuff, they were like, hey, yo, what 2 weeks ago you were dead. What are you doing? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Wow. That is like, I might remember you. I don't know if you've posted that on social. I'm sure you probably shared something about it.
I don't think I did actually. I was 23, I want to say 22 or 23, whatever I was in the end of 2017. So I was like still relatively young. And so it was like I mean, it was shocking. Like, when you're faced with your own mortality and everything, it's a whole weird existential thing, but we don't need to get into that.
I mean, this is the place for it if you want to, but like, no, I mean, that's insane. So you literally like actually died for 60 seconds.
My heart just stopped and then it decided to kick back on a little bit later.
That is wild. Okay, so you find out this news, and like you said, there's a ton of stuff running through your head. Now, I want to ask a question, but I want to give you a caveat with it, okay? So you said, obviously, it's going to be difficult because I realized I couldn't, work for a month and a half or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's take the we're not touring, we're not working part out of it.
Okay.
You individually, what's going through just your mind in general? Are you literally like, yes, career is always going to be a part of how we look at life. Yeah. Because we want to do these things, especially when it's a job we love. I'm not going to say creative, but just a job we love in general. Of course, if we're going to lose out on that potentially, we're going to be crushed by that. So that's of course a part of it. But what through that time frame are you literally sitting and you're like, well, I lost the thing that I've been like, of course, working towards, and maybe the thing that at this point I love most or whatever that may be with touring photography. So what is going through your head at that point in time? Is it just, man, I need to get back to work? Or is it like, did I just lose a part of my identity that I was building? And now, like, did you have to kind of reconstruct maybe who you were or what you did? Like, I don't know if that's like a too deep of a question or something. Or I
mean, it was just super surreal and shocking. Like, I wouldn't have guessed that would happen. Like, college athlete has a heart attack. That's not something that's very normal.
From a nap.
Yeah, it wasn't even like a nap. It was just like, I don't know what, like, it was literally a 1 in a bajillion chance sort of thing that just randomly happened while I was standing around. And so I think I did like have that, like, I might be losing a huge thing I was working towards. And like, that's what I was putting all my energy towards. I didn't have like a backup plan or anything. It was just music photography. And so I think, I had really good friends at the time. I'm still friends with them, but I leaned on them quite a bit. Like, I mean, I was out at the bars drinking like 2 weeks later in a sling, like I wasn't like totally defeated. I was like, I'm going to try and make the best of the situation and still like live my life and like not necessarily treat it like a vacation, but like, okay, let's just kind of enjoy ourselves while we can, since we're not traveling or whatever. So.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ross. Yes, the Ross from this very show that you're listening to right now. But this is an ad version of me because I'm interrupting this program to tell you all about something else that I do that I want you to know about. And that is my other podcast called Whose Life Is It Anyway? It's half an improv comedy podcast, half a game show, and well, full nonsense. So I want you to pretend like the life story that you're hearing right now in this episode of What You Don't Hear. Imagine if it was being completely made up as we went and was filled with, well, some pretty outrageous details.
You started losing it. I'm like,
that's a boner, pal.
I buzz it when you lose, right?
So I want your guys' show to take place within the universe of Harry Potter. This is a podcast that takes place inside the Marvel universe. I knew I was going to meet my fate. But one day, after all the children I've killed, I had no choice. Change.
She sings, "What you gonna do with all that junk? All that junk inside that trunk?"
Well, that is Whose Life Is It Anyway? Where in each episode, myself and 2 different guests sit down to make up a fake podcast interview with one of us in charge of the story, using different improv games and guidelines to move the interview along. Oh, and this is an improv show where the points do matter. So if you're looking for something maybe a little less serious and way more funny and even crude at times, well, I've got the show for you. You can find it on social by following @Who'sLifePod, or of course, you can listen to it or watch it on whatever platform you're currently checking this show out on right now. But for now, let's get back to the show. Right. So you didn't really necessarily, like, of course, I mean, again, not downplaying at all, like that's a big thing to deal with. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't necessarily maybe that moment where, like, once you kind of accepted it, like there wasn't that super long moment of, I guess, not accepting it is maybe the thing. Because I feel like that's an easy thing where you could have fallen into, oh my God, this is it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do without like, I mean, we hear it, being said all the time, like the first step to most things is acknowledging it, is accepting what it is and then deciding what we do about it. And it sounds like you found that acceptance and could say, all right, this is insane. I was dead. Who knows? Could die again. Don't know. But I'm still going to live my life. Yeah, I am very competitive, which is why I did track as well. It was just, so having that happen, I was like, I'm not going to let this stop me. And I kind of told my doctor that, and they were like, all right, we're going to work around it then. Like, let's see what we can do. And I have a great doctor, and they were just on my side the whole time. Like, okay, let's make this happen for you. Let's get things to work. Because going into it, I was like, if this is going to stop my career, I don't want a defibrillator. And my parents were like, no, you need to get one. And my doctor was like, you kind of need to get one, but let's have a conversation. And so yeah, I think I was just too stubborn to like give up on it too. Cause I was like, no, this really sucks, but I'm not going to let it just beat me down. Like my own body is not going to be the reason why I stopped doing this. Which is wild, but also so cool to hear. Yeah. Just like, it's wild because like your competitive nature at that point is actually just against yourself and your
absolutely life. Well, like,
it's like slow down.
Well, and that's what I liked about track too, was I was always competing against myself. You're always trying to get a faster time than you were individually, as well as beat everyone around you. But a big part of it was like, how fast can I physically push myself to the limits, and how far can I go? Right. So I know that we might jump ahead or something. Sure. But like, has there been any issues with that since then? I'm good. It's great. No issues. No, it's been nice. But I have like that protection in case I do kick it again, that I'll just come back to life. So it's kind of
course,
it's like a sick reset button, you know?
That is, man, you're so competitive. You're competing against death right now.
I honestly, nothing can stop me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you get back to quote unquote your original normal after that? Like, so you said it was like what, a month and a half?
Yeah, it was like, and it was like January and February, so like it was a pretty slow time anyways. And luckily Sweet Ascent, who had worked with, like, they were very understanding. It was like, yeah, dude, obviously you need to like, recover and do all those things. But I was like, no, as soon as you guys go back out, I'm going back out with y'all. And so, I think I did another couple tours with them. And I was doing a lot more of the VIP work, just like as much as I could at the time. And so 2018 was the year I got the offer to do a bus tour. So it was a weird, career freak out, thought I wasn't going to ever make it. And then I get this huge tour offer towards the end of the year in that summer.
Yeah.
And so that kind of came about because I was doing a local gig as a production assistant for the VIP company. And so I think it was Lindsey Sterling had a show in Kansas City, and they were starting the tour there. So they had 2 days, and like their VIP program was kind of big, so they needed extra hands. And so I was there the day before and the show day. And for a lot of the kickoffs for this company, a lot of like the bigwigs from corporate like come fly out to make sure everything goes smoothly. Everything did not go smoothly that day. Okay. And so I was just there kind of fixing things left and right, like just using weird skills that I picked up, like photo skills, IT skills, just all sorts of little stuff just to make things like work for them. And the hiring manager was like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, what do you do for work? And I was like, oh, well, I tour, doing photo and video. And they're like, oh, you tour? And I was like, I do. I feel like I know where this is going, but please continue. And so they're like, cool, let's have a conversation later. Here's my card, shoot me an email. And so I did. And they're like, great, let's, we talked about a bunch of stuff on an interview. And she was like, yeah, let's get you out on the road. This would be great. You sound like a good fit for VIP stuff. And yeah, then I got the call saying, do you want to work for Simple Minds? And I said, who is that?
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, again, is that sort of just like another domino effect of one thing leads to another, leads to another?
Mm-hmm. And so working with that company, I started getting a tour, and then the next year I got another tour with Papa Roach. And then the pandemic hit, which really like threw everything into turmoil, because I was supposed to go on tour with Peppa Pig.
Wow.
Running their meet and greets and everything. But I kind of feel like I dodged a little bit of a bullet, because I don't think I would do well on that tour, to be honest.
That's fair.
But I started doing these VIP tours because, one, the money is great, and two, again, it was another way to start getting into the photo world in a new way that I couldn't get just from shooting locally or whatnot. So while doing some of these bigger tours, I would still be at home, doing smaller band shows, smaller band tours, shooting for whoever I could, wherever I could, locally.
So what's pandemic like for you? Obviously, it's been talked about ad nauseum at this point from everybody. We know, what it was, but like you individually, you were a part of the crew that's like, none of us are doing anything, but for sure we have no idea when this whole tour thing is going to start back up. So what's going on then? Yeah,
so we were 3 days away from from flying out before it got canceled. Like literally, the tour was starting as COVID was happening, and so all these conversations were happening. At one point, it was just like, you get the X. And, my boss was like, you're fired. And I was like, wow, that's really great. Why? Damn, I'm kind of hurt by that. And they were like, no, it's a good thing. Apply for unemployment. I was like, yeah, okay. Yes. And so that actually like saved me a lot, because I was at home. I wasn't touring, because the only reason I didn't get an apartment at that time too was just because I was gone so much. That was like, doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to save money on rent, couch surfing, and staying with my parents whenever I'm like big gaps. Cool. So I'm just at home with my family. My brother was in college and he moved back home too, so it was very crowded. But literally the pandemic was like, cool, I'm making money from unemployment. I don't know how long it's going to last, but we'll see. So literally I'd wake up every morning. I would run 2 to 4 miles, cook some food, read some books, drink and play video games, and then start the next day over the same thing over and over again, which is kind of great. Very stress-free, but also like, I mean, I was emotionally exhausted from day one of it starting, just because the whole thing was like, cool, my whole career is gone.
Right. Yeah. Now, see, I wonder if you felt similarly in this way. Like for me, I will say the forced slowdown of being on lockdown, staying home was actually a great thing for me, because up until that point, I was not slowing down ever. Right. And there were moments where I needed to, moments that I could notice that I needed to, and all this sort of stuff. And I do a little bit of work for it, but that, like, hey, you have no choice but to sit and you're playing video games, and that's, you know, you're watching movies or going on jogs or whatever. It did sort of help me reassess a little bit of like, all right, cool. Now when I don't have any of this stuff and I'm not going 100 miles an hour, just going, I'm refocusing a little bit. And like that actually ended up being a kind of a big, in a creative way, a turning point for me, because I was able to kind of identify things that were not fulfilling to me anymore.
Sure.
So do you feel like, was there any part of you during that time? Yes, you just want to get back to touring. Clearly, I know that that's like the main answer, right? But was there any sort of that you were like, maybe I did need this slowdown a little bit. Like, I don't love it, but maybe I needed it. Or were you just like, hey, not really, like, let's go?
I think it was a good mix, because I really wanted to get back to work because that's all I knew how to do. But also I got to like really enjoy some hobbies that I didn't have a lot of time for, you know, and just relax and not think about where money is going to come from. And like, I don't know, kind of, I don't want to say be normal, but like just not stress about work as much. I mean, even though there was like a huge looming like stress, it wasn't like a day-to-day like, cool, I have to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. It was like, well, what book am I going to read today? What's my run route going to be? I'm going to cook something different today, you know, like.
Well, that large stress that we were all dealing with wasn't something that any of us could change.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like in our normal day to day, our stresses are filled with things that are only up to us, mostly, right? I hate this job. Do I quit? Do I keep going? I want this creative endeavor. Do I do it? Do I not? Like, so our stresses were different. And I think that that's maybe what allowed probably a lot of people during that time that we've, you know, seen and heard plenty of stories of like, people did start to identify what they liked and didn't like about their life, because the ultimate stressor of we're on lockdown, there's a pandemic, what the hell's happening? We can't really, we can't choose to actually change that, right? We can just sit back, play our part, do our thing, whatever. But when it comes to those day-to-day activities, like you were talking about, of like, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to focus on? It allows some clarity in that space where normally we otherwise probably wouldn't have. Because again, we're in go mode. But it's like, those are also the things that like, those are the things we can control at that point in time. So when does stuff open back up for you? Like when's first tour come back?
Yeah. So it was, let's see, I'm trying to remember. So in August, my unemployment ran out and I said, okay, I cannot stay at home any longer. I am losing my mind. The house is too crowded. Like, this feels like high school all over again. And don't get me wrong, I love my family and they're great, but I needed my own space. And I was just, So I moved out with no job at like prospects or any sort of like income at all, but a bunch of money saved up in the bank. So I was like, okay, I have a year's worth saved up. I think I can make things work until then. We're just going to like figure it out as we go. And so I moved from Pittsburgh up to Kansas City, and cheap, awful apartment, not a great area. Glad I moved out of there, but that's a whole different story. So moved there, and their concerts were still not a thing yet. So I was like, I have to figure out how to make money. So weddings were still happening. And so I started working at this really awful wedding company, very bland, very boring. They did not like my style. They had to retrain me how to use everything. And it was just awful. Business practices were not good. Like, I hated it there, but it was like a little bit of money every couple of weeks, which is enough to like elongate that pool of money and stretch for how much longer I can, you know, survive until music comes back, or I had to move back home or something would happen. And so I was doing that. And then I also started working for a preacher. Weirdly enough, you know, I'm a little religious, not super religious, you know, Catholic school background and everything like that. But a full like good old preacher that wore overalls, like Southeast Kansas to the max. Somebody in Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh is such a small world, had gotten my name. Like, Casey does like live events and like does content stuff, and they wanted like a full content works, and their whole plan was like, we're going to do these big traveling tours to, you know, do preaching and sermons and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, here's a number. This is what I'd like to get paid a week. And they were like, cool, we're only doing weekends. I was like, still. And they're like, great. So like, you're hired. And so I was like, cool, I get weekend work. And, you know, so I started doing that for the summer, and I didn't love it. And it was very much not what I intended to do. But it, again, stretched out the money until touring came back. And
for sure.
Yeah. And then I found on Bobnet, which is like a touring website, that it's like a job listing board almost. There was an ad for a tour, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start applying to everything I can see just to try and find something. And I got the call. There was like, yeah, you worked with this band. We trust them. If they say you're good, you're hired. Do you want to work with Bayside? And I was like, yeah, that'd be sick. When does it start? And they're like, and this was 2021. So 2021, I finally got back out on a tour.
Okay. So that is that sort of just like, all right, doors back open now.
Yes.
Is it then back into kind of what I would just call normal Casey mode, where it was like, all right, thing after thing after thing after thing? Was it just back to normal after that?
No, because COVID was still like very prominent for, you know, the time. And even that tour was like, all the rules were super weird and everything was very like strict, and, you know, touring wasn't really back open, but I was like, I got to start taking stuff. And this is like an opportunity I can't turn down. And from a band I enjoyed listening to, you know, some of their music, and I was like, this is cool. I want to do this. Right. And so I think it was still like a couple months after that before things like started like getting back more to normal, because I mean, we're getting closer to like now in the timeline. Yeah, because after Bayside, I mean, I was doing like local stuff up in Kansas City, but it wasn't like I was raking in the cash. I was like, okay, I still need to like work on getting a bus tour. One at least every year can like float me until the next one, until the next one, until the next one. But the VIP work had started ramping up a little more. And so I was doing more VIP work up here, and it was nice because I didn't have to drive to it. So I could actually like consistently like, okay, I'm not, you know, losing money by driving back and forth. I'm, you know, I have an apartment. This is going towards rent. Everything is cool. And I was also still getting in better with that company, you know?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So when does, cause do you still do a lot of work with like Emo Night and everything, right?
Yeah.
When does that pop up and all that?
So Emo Night, I started doing Emo Night, I want to say the fall of 2017 was their first show in Lawrence.
Okay, so that had been a previously established thing.
Yeah, okay. So that was a consistent gig up until COVID and a little bit after like COVID started opening back up.
Okay.
So that
why did I feel like it was like a more recent thing where you really were like really doing that with them? I don't.
So 2021 and 2022, a lot of that was Emo Night stuff. Like it was like one every weekend or two every weekend. And so we really went hard and like really pound the pavement with it. And it was good, consistent work, and I enjoyed doing it. So I was like, this is fun. Like we're just partying and taking photos. Like this is, you know, nothing difficult about it. I mean, granted, there's difficult stuff about it, but for the most part, like it was, you know, I knew how to do it without like, I wasn't stressed, you know?
Right. Yeah. It wasn't like, I got to make this thing happen.
I have no idea how to do any of this. Yeah. It was a consistent gig that got me through a lot of stuff too. And so I still love working with them, and I just did one last weekend. Yeah, I think it was one of those gigs where my boss knows that like I tour and that's the goal. And they said, if you want to tour, great, find somebody to cover. If not, it's here for you. And so that was like a really nice, like, okay, I can fill in between tours with Emo Night and other gigs till I get another tour offer, till I get another, you know, so.
Right. Okay. So when you look forward with all of this stuff, is it just tour until the wheels fall off, or tour until you decide that you want to chill out at home and take some pictures of something else? Or is it like, I want to evolve this photography into this sort of thing? Or like, Do you think in like in that way and plan in that way, or is it just like, hey, I just kind of go with it and whatever opportunity pops up, that's where we're going?
I mean, I think my end goal as of right now is I want to do arenas. I want to be as big as like I just want to be big as far as like, cool, this is the ceiling, but there's not really a ceiling in this kind of world, which is why I like it. So I want to keep like pushing the envelope, like how much further can I go with the career? And I don't know. I mean, the end goal of like, you know, what do I want to do before I settle down or whatever? I mean, not that I haven't thought that far ahead, but I think that's something that'll probably present itself more closer to. Because I mean, I'm 29, so like touring is going to be a lot longer in my eyes, at least. So before I stop doing that.
Right. And so is that like, do you kind of find yourself right now, like, I'm not going to say maybe comfortable is the wrong word, because hey, who's really, you know, yes, things can pop up at any point in time, but do you feel pretty like confident and relatively comfortable in where you're at right now in like the touring world? And like, do you see yourself on that trajectory of like, cool, I'm still forming and taking those opportunities?
Yeah. So I will say COVID was a little bit of a blessing because the company I worked for did a lot of restructuring and a lot of people like left and a lot of people joined, and like it was really chaotic. And I kind of fell through the cracks for a little while because the people who were like giving me work were no longer working there. So it was like no one was feeding me any sort of gigs or anything. But once they remembered that I was there, then it was like, cool, do you want to go fill in for Ghost? Oh, you did pretty all right on Ghost. Cool, let's give you another tour, and then Skill in Theory. And then, you know, it's kind of like, it's really, the snowball is rolling and rolling and rolling now just because it you know, the right opportunity happened.
Right. And this has been such an interesting, I feel like, episode of this, because it's wild to hear like the through line for me that I've heard is like what you called earlier, like your competitive nature, your competitiveness, I feel like has been a pretty consistent driving force for you to continuously figure all of this stuff out.
Yeah.
And not that there weren't down periods or difficult periods or whatever, but like, it's really interesting. Like, at least for me as an outsider to your story, and I don't know if you agree or you're like, oh, I've never really put it like that, but like hearing your kind of full story on the timeline in this episode, in this conversation, I'm like, okay. Like, I really do feel like it was that competitive drive that literally just sort of like you set yourself in go mode and went.
I mean, you got to stay hungry for what you want, you know?
No, absolutely. Like, and has there ever been a moment, and I ask this because I've faced this moment, because for a while I was like, I'm in go mode all the time, grind and hustle and do all the stuff.
Sure,
I'll never slow down. And then I've had those moments where I'm like, yo, in go mode is dope, but also I'm kind of sad and I'd like to be like, get my life in order in other ways.
Yeah.
Have you had any of those moments where you're like, I'm always in go mode, but I need to get this part figured out?
Yeah. So, I mean, I did Merciful Fate last fall. But after like Ghost got done, I was talking with my girlfriend. I was like, I think I should plan a vacation. And so we planned a trip in January to go to Hawaii on a cruise, and it was 18 days, phenomenal. And it was one of those like, wow, I did 2 tours in a row. I definitely earned this. And so I think it's more of a recent thing for like, oh, cool, I'm doing 2 tours in a row, I need a break. 2 tours in a row, I need a break, sort of thing. Because I just did 2 tours in a row with only 2 weeks between, and I am definitely not taking anything for work really, other than like small gigs, till like August.
Right. When I think, I asked that because it is important to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
It's like, listen, when you find success in something and you get the snowball rolling, of course, like you're stoked on that, but there's also a subtle fear, whether a lot of us want to admit it or not. There's a fear of, if you slow down that snowball, could it stop and disappear?
You want to keep the momentum up, for sure.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I agree.
All right, cool. I've got the momentum. I'm building it. There's a saying that like is it's like, with momentum you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Without it, you can't do anything right.
That makes sense.
And so it's like, when you have momentum, you just kind of keep going, and it's like, oh, it works. And when you don't have any momentum, you're like, nothing is working.
Yeah.
Nothing makes any sense. Nothing's clicking, whatever. And so, of course, we always want to capitalize on that momentum. But I feel like even for me, I found a way to balance like, cool, I've got that momentum and I've got things going.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually have to be going at 100 miles an hour. I've got it at a way more steady pace where like if I want to pull off the road for a second and take in the scenery, aka take in life and slow down for a second, and then like I'm confident enough in the things that I can do that I'll be able to get back on the train and start us back up.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it might take a little bit of, you lost some momentum there, but I'm also like, I don't feel like I'm personally like, I literally was talking with somebody else about this a couple days ago. Like, I feel like I've almost got this new, somewhat like a little bit of a separation between like the attachment of that go mode or the attachment of that momentum, where I'm like, I want momentum for sure. And there's a business person somewhere that could hop in and be like, if you stop, you're a loser. Like, sure, absolutely. There's a point to be made for that. But I feel like I have personally found like a very solid comfort with like, if I feel like slowing down or dare I say doing nothing for a little bit, I'm like, cool. Does everything else, like, is there enough of that subtle momentum, right? That I can slow down and I can do this because I'm also confident enough in my ability or and I'm not even talking creative ability, just like as a human, I'm confident enough that I can get myself going again.
Yeah.
Because I think that's often what can happen. Is like, the creative thing or the job or the entity might stop or slow down. And then we don't know what we do without that thing. And I feel like I know who I am without those things. Therefore, I'm not super worried about whether I'm constantly going and doing that thing anymore. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I think it is a lot easier to say now, like, especially for myself, maybe for yourself too, now that we're at a little bit more stable and comfortable part of our careers. But I mean, I don't know if I would listen to myself if I told myself this, and I don't know if you would either, but if you told your past self, hey, it's okay to like slow down and lose a little momentum, I would have said I was crazy and like, absolutely not, and it's like I said, it's a lot easier now that I'm like sitting comfortably, like, I'm making a living off of my career and like things are going well. I have health insurance, like things,
Right. Yeah, no, I totally like, I get what you're saying. And it's weird because like because I feel like if I were sharing that advice with my past self, I wouldn't be doing it in the sense of, hey, your career, hey, your creative, whatever. I would be sharing the things that I've learned about like myself of like, hey, you're going to get real burnout and real depressed if you don't make sure to focus on these aspects.
Sure.
Right. Because I think like, a couple of years ago, I identified that I had a heavy problem with like, basically the way that I put it is like my social bar was completely on E. To where like I would, get social time with like friends every once in a while. And sure, I'm on a set with people and that's exciting, or in a meeting with somebody and that's exciting. But otherwise, like what I would call normal life was like running on E.
Sure.
There was no, it was like, hey, cool, I'm getting some creative fulfillment, but otherwise, like, I'm sad as fuck. Like, oh my God, like this sucks, right? And so I think like that's where my head always goes with that stuff. Is it's almost like if I were sharing advice with a past version of me, I'd be like, hey, you need to slow down, but here's why. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, no, I need this career. Yeah. But your career doesn't mean anything if you if you're not built with a capacity to handle it.
Sure.
Right. And I feel like that's probably one of my biggest things that I feel like I've learned over the years is like, again, like go mode. Yes. Like, do I sit here currently today and do more than the average person? Probably. Yes. Yeah. Right. I'm always adding new projects to the list and it's not going to stop until I see fit. Right.
Sure.
And like, that definitely comes from a place of like, we've done the work to get in that comfortable area, but I almost would say that I feel like continuing to take those chances and create those opportunities is actually continuously getting uncomfortable. Right? Because each one of those new opportunities could easily fail.
Sure.
Each one of those new things could not work. Right. And of course, barring another worldwide pandemic where we all have to shut down and not have jobs and make any money or whatever. Like, I think that that's where I sit now is like my comfort comes more from understanding who I am and what I want, which allows me to sit and identify the things that I do or do not want. Where for a while, if I'm looking back at like 23-year-old me and I was giving him advice, and sure, I'd be like, hey, let's slow down, let's take this into consideration. I think less of my point would be like, hey, you're gonna get the gig one day, like you're good. Mine would be way more like, yo, your mental health will take a hit if you do not refocus on this energy, and more so if you don't slow down to make sure you're identifying who you are. And I don't know if you necessarily, like, I don't know if you ever ran into that. Again, having that kind of like, hey, I've kind of always gone off my competitiveness, and that's been a good driving force for me. But I know for me, like, I feel like so much of my identity became wrapped in what I did rather than what I did being an extension of my identity. Yeah. Like there's another saying that I love is like, who are you when no one else is around?
Sure.
So it's like, who are you, right? Yeah. Are you somebody who is like, clearly I think your answer would absolutely be like, well, yeah, if there was no, maybe I'm wrong, but like if there's no shows to shoot, I'm still going to be like wanting to be creative, and I'm still going to want a camera in my hands, and I'm still going to, that competitive nature is still going to be there, right? Yeah. When no one else is around and I'm sitting in my room by myself, I'm still running through my head of a ton of ideas and things I want to do and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, if you don't have a place or a person to showcase that stuff to, who are you? Yeah. No, I think that's maybe one of my biggest things that I've learned. And I would love to know if like you've ever either dealt with that or thought about that of like, again, like we're not always the things we do. We need to make sure that those are an extension of us. Like, have you felt like that? Or has it been sort of still like the go mode thing? Like,
yeah, I think, whenever I moved into my apartment, it was a studio apartment. I lived by myself. So I definitely, since I wasn't shooting shows, I don't know if you remember seeing all this stuff, but I did a bunch of like really weird work, like that was just nothing to do with music, a lot of self-portraits and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun, just like getting to like be creative and like, I have this idea, how do we execute it? And like, just kind of learning and like making some really bad stuff too. And just, figuring things out. And I think that was like kind of, I still am very creative, even if I don't have like live music to work on and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think that is like being able to identify that why. You know what I mean? It is that why. It's not the like what necessarily. It's like, oh, I'm a photographer. I'm a creative director. I'm a freelancer. I'm a whatever. It's like, well, why do you do it? Yeah. And I think because then that helps you kind of reverse engineer. Like if that thing gets taken away, well, cool. Why are you doing anything? It's to fulfill yourself in these other ways. So it's like that, I think, is how we keep up momentum that we were talking about, right? It's like your momentum doesn't have to be tied to one thing, because if that thing slows down, it becomes an anchor, where it's like, if we can create and build our own momentum of, all right, I might not be doing this thing, but I know I can rebuild my own momentum in this thing over here, right? Yeah. And I know that's such like a vast, like, well, Ross, not everybody wants to do 100 things, asshole. Like, I get it. But I still think like the value is in just like knowing who we are at our core. Sure. And understanding like, why do we do the things that we do? It's like, that's one of my main answers whenever somebody's like, Ross, like, why do you do 100 different things? It's like, it might sound cheesy, but it's like, because I know why I do them. I know why I want to do them. It's not just that I like really hope that 77 of my different podcasts get viral or something. Sure. It's not out of that. It's like, well, I know the element at its core as to why I like doing these things. So understanding that allows me to put that energy and thus build momentum into any different thing. So I have a last handful of questions.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
This time has I literally feel like we've been talking for like 20 minutes, but it's been almost an hour and a half. What do you feel like when you look back at your entire journey up to now, what do you feel like the biggest lesson is that you have learned? And I don't want it to be a business lesson. I don't want it to be, because like what I've heard is like you've been really good at something that not a lot of people are often that good at. And that is creating those opportunities for yourself, going to the shows, networking, kind of like quote unquote selling yourself and making sure those doors are open. Right. So less on like the business side, but more so about you. I would love to hear like, what do you feel like the biggest thing is that you've learned about you during this process?
See, I could talk about like business and stuff like that for hours, but then you get in the philosophy stuff and I'm like, oh, what did I learn along the way? Like friendship was the biggest lesson, like friendship was there a lot,
what? I've learned that too.
I think the biggest thing probably is like figuring out what I wanted and just keep going after it, you know, like really like that, the tenacity and like, again, it's the competitiveness and like making sure that always stays big for me, I think is like one of the biggest things, and like having an outlet to put that into. Because like even whenever I wasn't doing music photography and stuff like that, I always had an outlet for like, you know, let's be competitive in sports, let's be competitive in gaming, let's be competitive in, you know, whatever. And so having some sort of like outlet to channel that, I think has probably been like the best like thing I learned from all of this, especially this conversation right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, that's even why I asked that, because it's like, again, as an outsider to your story now, like, I feel like that is the thing, is like you learned how to harness your quote unquote competitive nature.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people can hear the word competitive and give it a negative connotation.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, not
absolutely.
everything's a competition.
No,
right?
but there's good competition too.
Yeah, with other people, or when the competition is with yourself.
Yeah.
Of how do I be a better version of myself, or just the best version of ourselves every day, you know, whatever that looks like. Can we do our best each day?
Yeah.
That best is going to sometimes look up here, other times be down here, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I feel like you learned pretty early on how to harness that competitive energy. And it wasn't just because when you first started explaining these things earlier, I was like, I wonder if he's going to hit that burnout point, because you're, again, just like going. But I feel like you learn to harness that competitiveness of not just, I don't feel like you were doing stuff just to be busy.
No.
You were doing it because you were like, no, I know how this feeds me.
And I have a goal in mind. And like, yeah.
Exactly.
And the thing about it too was like, you know, I learned with track, I got so many life lessons from track in college. I mean, just like good competitiveness and like having teammates and things like that. But also like recovery days are 100% a thing. Like you're not always working out to failure every single day. You know, we would have days off and slower days and easier days. So like knowing that, hey, I need those days for myself, not just for my body, but for like the rest of my life. Like all roundedness of it all, you know, that was important too.
100%. That's, I mean, I think a lot of people are learning that now. Like, rest is productive. Doing nothing sometimes is productive. That's the most productive thing you can sometimes do, is just sit for a day and not chase after the goal, not chase after the dream, give yourself some space, binge Netflix, whatever it is like that. Absolutely. And that's a fun way to learn that lesson. Is like, physically you were learning that lesson. Like, hey, we got a rest day today, we're not going hard. But that easily translates into like, all right, cool, I think I got my momentum going. I can kind of we can coast through today, and that's all right. I don't have to go exert myself 100% energy. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I love that. And I think that makes, again, total sense, because I feel like that has been the through line through this story. Is harnessing that competitiveness and harnessing that energy and being able to continuously build momentum out of that, but also find a confidence in yourself of knowing whether you were conscious of it or it was subconsciously there. It sounds like you kind of maybe always had that confidence of knowing like, oh, nope, I can, my competitiveness is going to kick in. My whatever is going to kick in. Cool. I can make this happen.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like there was ever let's use the word confidence. Do you ever feel like there was a lack of that confidence in what you were doing?
I think whenever I wasn't doing something, I think there was definitely a lack of confidence, because whenever I was physically, so growing up in Southeast Kansas, like you're pretty far removed from the music industry. Like that's just a fact. You know, you're not in Nashville, you're not in LA, you're not in New York. Like you can't just walk down the street and just run into somebody and make a connection. So physically not being in the concert space or in the music space or anything like that, physically not being there definitely broke me down a little bit and made me feel like I wasn't getting anything done. Because if you're there, you have the chance to run into somebody, you have more opportunities and stuff like that. So I think that kind of tied into it a lot, was physically not being places and feeling that confidence drop whenever I wasn't there.
Yeah, which in turn kind of like, at least in my opinion, I feel like shows you in a way kind of what we were just talking about of like, was that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, just as an identifier, like was some of that confidence attached to the thing rather than actually in you the whole time?
Oh, absolutely.
Being able to step back and identify like, okay, like the classic, like when no one else is around, what am I? Cool. When I'm not in a concert space, when I'm not, you know, running around on a tour, you know, whatever, what am I? And, you know, does that confidence wane a little bit? Or you then find other ways to fill those gaps of like, oh no, cool. I'm still who I am and who I want to be, even if I'm not physically doing the thing.
I think it's been a lot more recent of a thing is figuring out who I am without all of this stuff, just because being young and chasing it down and just not stopping and everything like that. You kind of grow and you learn as you do the things, and so I think all of that journey has kind of built me up a little bit more to figure out the downtime and figure out myself and like that kind of stuff. So I think the going and going and going kind of helped me out in that aspect, at least, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. You often won't learn it until you do it and experience it.
Yeah.
If you didn't experience that sort of stuff, like if I didn't experience being burnt out and ultimately being really, really depressed from just working all the time for years, if I didn't go through that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today being like, hey, rest is important and you should slow down. And I think you should reevaluate I wouldn't be able to say that because I didn't experience it. It wouldn't just be like, hey, I read this quote online that said to slow down. So sure, I'll say that. It's like we often don't know until we actually experience those things. So before we begin to wrap up, is there anything major that we haven't covered?
So
I always like to double check. So
I did the Ghost tour last fall. And then right after that, they put me on Merciful Fate, and Merciful Fate was like, hey, can you do content stuff while you're out here too? And I was like, this is my chance. Sweet. I'm getting hired to do VIP and photo stuff. Like, this is what I've been trying to do this whole time. So it finally started opening up for, hey, you have more than one job on the tour because you are a Swiss Army knife. Like, you can do these multiple things, which I've been trying to do the whole time. Like, that's been the end goal. I like VIP, but photo is more my wheelhouse. So I did Merciful Fate, and, it went well, and the photos and everything turned out great. And because of that, the company realized, hey, we can market you as a package deal to bands. We have a tour in the spring, or in the winter, I guess. It was February, with Skillet and Theory of a Dead Man. Do you want to run VIP for both those bands and do content for both of them? And I was like, I am so in. And so now the company is starting to go, okay, we can send him out to do VIP, but also he can take photos and do content stuff on the road and still handle it. And because of that Theory of a Dead Man Skillet tour, I just recently got back from Europe with Skillet because they liked my work so much that they were like, yeah, we don't really have a lot of VIP for this tour, but you're going to, run those small meet and greet, but you're here for a lot of content stuff. And so it's, the momentum is still going, the snowball is still rolling, but it's more in the direction of the end game of like, cool, I'm getting in with bigger bands to do photo and VIP, not just VIP stuff. So,
no, I love that. I absolutely love that. Here's a question for you. We're going to play pretend for a second.
Okay.
All right. So time travel is real.
Yep.
And right now, a future version of you shows up and he's going to share some stuff with you.
Okay.
What is it that you're hoping that he tells you that your life looks like? Is he just going to show up and be like, yo, Casey, we're dope. We're a dope photographer and see you later. Are there more elements to that that you hope that he would share?
Yeah, I think stability is one thing. Like, that tour with Skillet in Europe was the first time I've had a band bring me back out for a second time. So like stability with an artist that's like reliable and is like, hey, you're our guy. You're going to be the guy. You don't have to think about being the guy because you're just the guy. So knowing there's that sort of trust and like stability with an artist, that way I don't have to go, I've never worked with these people before. I don't know what it's going to be like. To like, yeah, I'm going to be their person. And, and whether that's for one artist or several artists, I don't really know. So I think stability in that sense is definitely something that I'm like actively looking for sure. Because in the music industry, my whole life has not been stable up until this point. So,
yes.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. But also like, upward movement, like, hey, you've reached this point in your career, but also there's still more you can do.
Yeah. Not the like, hey, we got there and boy, does it suck. It's like, hey, we got there and we're going to keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
There's more opportunities. Yeah. Last couple questions.
Sure.
For you. One, something that I have been doing on recent episodes is giving the guest the opportunity to toss a question my way, because I've been grilling you with questions and all this sort of stuff this entire time. is there anything, we can reverse roles here for a second. This will be your show for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would love to toss my way? Or if not, we can just jump to the next thing.
So have you had any point in your career or anything like that where you felt your competitiveness was either a good thing or a hindrance for you? And it doesn't have to be like a specific instance. It could be an overall thing, but I'm just now curious since we've talked about mine so much.
Yeah, I think that like there was definitely times where like I think I almost was, I don't think I ever identified it as competitiveness.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that sort of like that go mode sort of
The
thing.
drive.
Right? Like I've never really, yeah. I definitely think that like there's absolutely been times where I was so in go mode that, like I said earlier, I wasn't making sure that like, I was so focused on like building the machine that I didn't focus on maintenance on the machine.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So like once I got it, build it, and we're on the tracks and we're rolling, if we want to again call it like the competitiveness of like, I gotta go, I gotta win, I gotta, whatever for me, for whoever.
End game sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that sort of thing. Like I was so almost tunnel vision focused on, I just want this to work that I didn't really think about how does it work?
Sure.
Right. It was so much about like, when's the next thing? And yes, it's easy to get in survival mode. It's easy to sit and be like, oh, I have no money. Like I said earlier, like there was absolutely a time where I'm like literally counting change so I could walk to the gas station down the road to buy a drink or something. Like 100% happened. But I think a lot of that happened, yes, because half of it we can just say, hey, you know what? That's sometimes the path. Sure. That's the struggle. That's the price we pay in quarters to, try and make these things that we want happen. Yeah. That comes with the territory. But I will also say now, and this is something I share with people all the time, is like the other half of that is on us. You know what I mean? And it's not grind harder. That's the kind of the opposite of what I'm talking about. It's the classic like work smarter, not harder.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think for a while that grinding, that competitiveness, that go mode, absolutely in a way, like it was simultaneously a good thing and a bad thing for me. Like you said, was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? I think it was both. I think it was absolutely both, because without grinding, quote unquote, I hate that word, like the way that I did, I wouldn't have achieved the things that I've achieved, and I wouldn't be sitting doing the things that I'm doing. That work had to be put in. But the point that I'm making is the way in which I did that work. I think that is what I could have changed. Okay. So I think that in that element is how it maybe got in the way or was a hindrance to me. Not so much in career development, but in personal development. Gotcha. Because I do think that there's tons of ways that we can sit and have all these rad career growths and get all these cool opportunities and create all these dope things. Yeah. But also you can go home that night and be the saddest person in the whole area, right? Yeah. That has been me many times over. And there's probably, again, life happens. There's always going to be ups and downs, right? But I think now where my comfort comes from is that I'm not worried about being in go mode while simultaneously getting to do a bunch of stuff all at the same time. It's being able to, like I feel like you have done, it's harness that competitive energy. Be able to harness that and do something productive with it. Yeah. Right? Not just being busy, but being productive. Sure. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Like I think that roundabout way. Yeah.
we'll say that was an answer. Another thing that I'm doing. Okay. And maybe you can because I'm going to start having guests actually physically write this in a little booklet that I have, but we are obviously doing this remotely. So maybe you can text it to me. You can say it now, or maybe we'll note it down later. I would love for you to give me a question to ask my next guest.
Oh, okay. I think I just want to stay on the whole theme now and just go,
hey, we got a theme.
Like, what drives you to compete to get better?
Okay. Yeah. I love that. I am actually, you know what? Since you're not physically here.
Perfect.
I am noting this one down for us. So, what drives you? Give me the question again.
What drives you to compete to get better?
Okay.
That makes sense, right?
No, it does. It does. And I also love that we have, in a roundabout way, formed a really solid theme.
I think we did, yeah.
That is in the biz what we call a through line.
Love it.
So perfect. We got that. So now, unless there's anything burning that you're like, whoa, wait, we should talk about this, or wait, we didn't talk about this, or I have another question for you, or anything like that, I just have one final question for you, and then we've made a podcast.
Perfect. Hit me.
So right now, I would love for you to pretend like everyone in the world is listening to you speak. So you have a live mic. It's attached to everyone. Logic is out the window. They can hear you. They can understand you. And you get to share something with everybody right now. So everybody's listening. What would you like to tell them, and what would you want them to hear?
See, I knew you were going to ask this because you do this all the time, and I just didn't think about it. But we're gonna stick with the theme. So running in track, I did 400 hurdles, which I would not recommend doing. It's full lap with hurdles the whole time, like tough. So you run the race, and there's a lot of different philosophies on it. But how I would run the race was that you start out strong, and you don't necessarily coast. You're still going fast, but knowing okay, I still have 300 meters left of the race. I still have 200 meters left of the race. And whenever I get to the last 100 meters of the race, I give it everything and then some. I would have a kick. I would push myself beyond my limits because I could see the finish line. So knowing when to give the energy to whatever you're doing, whether your projects or whatnot, and being able to read, hey, I know, I'm starting out in this, I got to start out real strong, but not giving so much of your energy to where that last, you're so close to the finish line, you burn out, you get a leg cramp, you can't finish. Knowing to have some reserve tank and knowing when to really push yourself and really know how to, what your speed needs to be, I think would probably be the advice.
Dude, I love that. I did not expect us to have a bunch of really solid track analogies.
Like I said, I'm shocked with how much I learned from college track.
For real. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, wow, these are really good.
My coach would be proud.
Yeah, you know what? Well, hopefully they listen to this. They're like, wow, Casey, I knew you had it in you. Yeah. Incredible. Well, dude, I cannot thank you enough. I mean, obviously we're friends. So of course, yes, you were down to do this, but I'm so stoked that we just got to make this actually happen.
Absolutely.
Have this type of conversation. Because again, we've talked in so many different ways. We've talked in the midst of Call of Duty War, but we've never actually gotten to sit and really dive in this way. So I'm just very, very stoked we got to make this happen.
Me too.
And instead of waiting for the world to align our schedules so we could physically sit down, damn it, we're using the interwebs.
Making it happen.
And we are making it happen. So final thing before we officially say goodbye. If anybody wants to come check out anything that you do, they want to get a hold of you, they want to come see your work, do you want them to come check it out, and where can they do that at?
Yeah, so all of my stuff for the most part is under Steinmiller Productions. Instagram, Facebook, my Twitter is it's memes, so don't worry about that one. If you look up my last name, you'll find my website, anything like that. You can reach me just about however with all of the social media stuff, but Steinmiller Productions is what I kind of go by. So yeah,
beautiful, dude. Casey, thank you so much.
It's been a blast. I'm happy about this.
Very stoked that we made this happen.
Same.
All right, I'm glad Casey and I got to make this fun chat happen. It was nice to catch up, honestly, not in the middle of the battlefield on Call of Duty, running around and yelling when an enemy is anywhere nearby. And when I say yelling, that would be me yelling in fear, at least from my side of things. But anyway, if you do, if you do want to play video games with Casey, I don't know where to tell you to go for that. But if you do want to check him out, check out all of his work and everything that he's capturing out there on the road, well, you can go follow him at Steinmiller Productions. Of course, it's all linked directly in the show notes on wherever you're listening to this at or watching this on, of course. It's all down there in the show notes in the description of the episode. Also, there's where you can find where to follow this show at, which is at WYDH Pod. Please toss a follow if you haven't yet. You can also follow me personally if you would like. I am at Ross Tyson. That's THEISEN for Tyson. Just about everywhere on every platform. I also ask you to double check that you're subscribed on whatever platform that you check this episode out on, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or I don't know, one of those random podcast apps that exist, but I've truly never once heard anyone say that they used. But they definitely exist. They're definitely out there, and the show can be found on them. Wherever it is, I truly do appreciate your support. And of course, you can find these episodes also in video form on my personal YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Ross Tyson. I would really love for you to find that subscribe button over there as well. And if you want to take an extra step in that support of any kind, drop a rating and a review, please. It helps out truly a ton. It helps tell an algorithm somewhere that this show matters even a little bit. But that'll do it for this episode. So thank you so much for listening. And if you watched on YouTube, thanks for looking. And I cannot overstate just really how much I appreciate anyone ever checking this show out or really checking out anything that I do anywhere at any time. You are wonderful, and I will catch you in the next one where I sit down with my next guest, whom, I don't know, you may or may not know of, as they share their story that you for sure never heard.